The morning
It is with
sun
a sense
cast
of
long
duty and
shadows across the
resolve
manicured
that I
gardens of
address you
Buckingham
today.
Palace as King Charles III sat in his private study, staring at the draft speech that would change everything. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier than it did in that moment, as he prepared to share the most personal battle of his life with millions of people around the world. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the royal physician, had delivered the news 3 weeks earlier during what was supposed to be a routine health checkup. The king had been experiencing persistent fatigue and some discomfort that he had initially dismissed as the natural result of his demanding schedule. At 75, he had always prided himself on his stamina and dedication to duty, often working 16-hour days despite his age. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid we need to discuss the results of your recent tests," Dr. Mitchell had said, her usually confident demeanor betraying a hint of concern. The words that followed seemed to echo in slow motion through the ornate consulting room. Cancer. The diagnosis hit him like a physical blow, yet Charles had maintained his composure, asking practical questions about treatment options and timelines with the same methodical approach he applied to state affairs. The past 3 weeks have been a whirlwind of private consultations with specialists, careful coordination with palace staff, and the agonizing decision of when and how to inform the public. Charles had insisted on maintaining his regular engagements for as long as possible, not wanting to cause unnecessary alarm or speculation. However, the physical demands of his condition and the upcoming treatment schedule made it clear that transparency was not just preferable, but necessary. Queen Camilla had been his constant source of strength throughout this ordeal. She sat beside him now, her hand gently resting on his shoulder as he reviewed the speech one final time. Their relationship, once the subject of public scrutiny and controversy, had evolved into a partnership built on genuine love and mutual support. She understood better than anyone the weight of responsibility he felt toward the British people and the Commonwealth. "You don't have to carry this burden alone," she had told him the night after the diagnosis. "We've faced challenges before, and we'll face this one together." Her words had provided comfort during the sleepless nights when worry threatened to overwhelm his usually steady resolve. The decision to address the nation personally, rather than through a written statement, had been Charles's own. He believed that in an age of increasing distance between institutions and the people they served, honesty and direct communication were essential. The British public had supported the monarchy through various crises over the decades, and he felt they deserved to hear directly from him about this challenge. Palace Communications Director James Hartwell had spent days coordinating with television networks and media outlets to ensure the address would reach as wide an audience as possible. The timing had been carefully chosen for early evening, when families would be gathering for dinner and maximum viewership could be achieved. International broadcasters had also been provided with advance notice, recognizing the global interest in the British monarch's health. Charles reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. His entire life had been preparation for kingship, yet nothing could have prepared him for the personal vulnerability that came with sharing such intimate news with the world. He thought about his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and how she had handled various crises during her long reign with grace and dignity. Her example provided a template for how to approach difficult moments with honesty while maintaining the dignity of the crown. The speech itself had gone through numerous drafts. Charles had worked closely with his private secretary and communications team to strike the right tone, serious enough to convey the gravity of the situation, but hopeful enough to reassure the public that he remained committed to his duties and optimistic about his treatment. Every word had been carefully chosen, every phrase examined for potential misinterpretation. Outside the palace walls, the British public remained largely unaware of what was to come. Social media buzzed with routine discussions about royal engagements and upcoming events. The palace had successfully managed to keep the diagnosis private, allowing Charles time to process the news with his family and closest advisors before making it public. Prince William had been among the first to be informed, receiving a private call from his father the day after the diagnosis was confirmed. The conversation had been emotional for both men, marking a moment when the theoretical future of William's eventual succession suddenly felt more immediate and real. William had immediately offered to take on additional responsibilities, demonstrating the maturity and readiness that would serve him well in the months ahead. Princess, and known for her no-nonsense approach and unwavering support of her brother, had been characteristically practical in her response. She had quietly begun rearranging her own schedule to accommodate additional royal duties, understanding without being asked that the family would need to rally together during Charles's treatment. The medical team assembled for the king's care represented the finest oncological expertise available in Britain and beyond. Professor David Thompson, one of London's leading cancer specialists, had taken personal charge of the case, working with Dr. Mitchell to develop a comprehensive treatment plan. The goal was to pursue aggressive treatment while minimizing disruption to Charles's royal duties wherever possible. Treatment was scheduled to begin the following week at a private facility in London. The medical team had assured Charles that many of his responsibilities could continue during certain phases of treatment, though some modifications to his schedule would be necessary. This information would be crucial to include in his address, as public concern about the continuity of royal duties was certain to arise. Charles had also spent considerable time thinking about the broader implications of his diagnosis. As someone who had long advocated for various health and environmental causes, he recognized that his public battle with cancer could help raise awareness and potentially encourage others to seek early medical attention. The royal platform, he realized, could be used to destigmatize discussions about cancer and highlight the importance of regular health screenings. The king's relationship with the media had evolved significantly over the decades. Early in his public life, coverage had often focused on his personal relationships and occasional controversial statements about architecture, agriculture, or environmental issues. Now, facing the most serious challenge of his reign, he appreciated the responsibility that came with public communication and the need for absolute clarity in his message. As the afternoon wore on, final preparations were being made in the stateroom where the address would be filmed. Lighting technicians worked to ensure the setting would convey appropriate gravitas while maintaining the warmth and accessibility that Charles wanted to project. The backdrop had been carefully chosen to include subtle references to continuity and stability, family photographs, historical artifacts, and symbols of the monarchy's enduring presence. The speech would last approximately 8 minutes, a length calculated to provide sufficient detail without overwhelming viewers or creating unnecessary anxiety. Charles had practiced the delivery multiple times, working with voice coaches to ensure his words would be clear and his tone appropriately measured. Despite decades of public speaking experience, this address felt different from any he had given before. Security arrangements for the evening had been enhanced, though officials were careful not to create an atmosphere of crisis. The goal was to present the king's announcement as serious but manageable news, part of the natural challenges that any 75-year-old might face, rather than a constitutional emergency. International diplomatic protocols had also been quietly activated. Key Commonwealth leaders, foreign heads of state, and diplomatic partners have been given advance notice of the announcement's timing, allowing them to prepare appropriate responses and coordinate any necessary adjustments to planned meetings or events with the king. The evening news programs had already begun promoting a special announcement from the palace, though specific details remained under wraps. Social media speculation was beginning to increase, with royal watchers and news outlets attempting to determine the nature of the upcoming address. Palace staff had managed to maintain operational security while still generating appropriate anticipation for the broadcast. Charles took a final look at his notes, though by now he knew the speech by heart. The words represented not just information to be conveyed, but a philosophical approach to leadership during adversity. He wanted to demonstrate that facing health challenges, even serious ones, did not diminish one's capacity to serve others or contribute meaningfully to society. The technical crew signaled that everything was ready for the broadcast. Charles adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and prepared to step into the stateroom, where cameras waited to capture one of the most significant moments of his reign. In a few minutes, he would share his diagnosis with the world, beginning a new chapter in both his personal journey and his role as monarch. Queen Camilla squeezed his hand one final time before he rose from his chair. "The people will understand," she said quietly. "They'll see your strength and your commitment to serving them, even through this challenge." Her confidence in him provided the final bit of reassurance he needed as he walked toward the cameras that would carry his message across the globe. The weight of history seemed to settle around his shoulders as he prepared to speak words that no British monarch had ever spoken before. Cancer had touched the lives of countless families across the realm, and now it had reached the very heart of the monarchy itself. How he handled this moment would set the tone for everything that followed. Hashtag King Charles breaks his silence. Part 2, the red recording light blinked on at precisely 7 o'clock, and King Charles III looked directly into the camera with the steady gaze that had served him through decades of public service. The state room fell silent except for the barely audible hum of equipment as millions of people across Britain and the Commonwealth settled in front of their televisions, unaware that they were about to witness a defining moment in modern royal history. "My dear people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms," Charles began, his voice carrying the measured tone that had become familiar to the public over the years. "I speak to you today from Buckingham Palace with news of a personal nature that I believe you have a right to hear directly from me." The gravity in his voice immediately commanded attention, and across the nation, conversations quieted as families gathered around their screens. 3 weeks ago, during a routine medical examination, I received a diagnosis that has required me to make some important decisions about my health and my service to you. Charles paused briefly, allowing his words to settle before continuing. "I have been diagnosed with cancer, and I will be beginning treatment shortly." The simple, direct statement carried enormous weight, delivered without drama, but with unmistakable seriousness. In living rooms across Britain, the reaction was immediate and profound. Sarah Williams, a retired teacher in Manchester, felt tears spring to her eyes as she reached for her husband's hand. They had followed the royal family for decades, and this news felt deeply personal. Similar scenes played out in homes from Scotland to Wales, from Northern Ireland to the furthest reaches of the Commonwealth, as people processed what they had just heard. The king continued his address, explaining that the diagnosis had been caught relatively early and that his medical team was optimistic about the treatment plan. He spoke about the excellent care he was receiving and his determination to continue serving the British people throughout his treatment whenever possible. His words were carefully crafted to acknowledge the seriousness of his condition while providing reassurance about both his personal prognosis and the continuity of royal duties. "I want to be absolutely transparent with you about what this means," Charles said, his hands folded calmly on the desk before him. "There will be periods during my treatment when I will need to reduce my public engagements, and some events may need to be postponed or handled by other members of the royal family. However, I remain committed to my constitutional duties and to serving you to the best of my ability." The immediate response from Downing Street was swift and supportive. Prime Minister had been briefed hours earlier and had prepared a statement expressing the government's full support for the king during his treatment. Political leaders from across the spectrum put aside partisan differences to offer their best wishes and assurances of cooperation during this challenging time. International reaction began pouring in within minutes of the broadcast conclusion. President Biden called from the White House to offer personal support and the thoughts of the American people. European leaders, many of whom had developed close working relationships with Charles over the years, issued statements of solidarity and encouragement. The Commonwealth Secretariat immediately began coordinating responses from member nations, each expressing their continued confidence in the king's leadership. Social media exploded with messages of support, but also with questions and concerns about what this meant for the monarchy's future. Royal correspondents and constitutional experts began providing analysis and context, explaining the precedents for royal health issues and the mechanisms in place to ensure continuity of government and constitutional functions. Dr. Patricia Reynolds, a leading oncologist at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, was among the first medical experts to provide public commentary on the King's announcement. Speaking to the BBC, she emphasized that cancer treatment had advanced dramatically in recent years and that many people successfully continued their professional responsibilities during treatment. Her comments helped provide context for the public about what the King's journey might look like in the months ahead. The Palace Press Office, led by Communications Director James Hartwell, had prepared for an intensive period of media management following the announcement. They had anticipated questions about everything from a specific type of cancer to the line of succession, and had prepared detailed briefing materials to ensure consistent and accurate information was provided to journalists worldwide. Prince William's immediate response demonstrated the seamless coordination that had been planned for this moment. Within an hour of his father's broadcast, William issued a personal statement expressing his love and support for the King, while also assuring the public that the royal family was united and prepared to take on additional responsibilities as needed. His statement struck exactly the right tone of personal emotion combined with professional readiness. The Archbishop of Canterbury, spiritual leader of the Church of England, led prayers for the King during an evening service at Canterbury Cathedral. His words reflected the unique position of the monarch as both head of state and supreme governor of the Church of England, acknowledging the personal and institutional dimensions of this challenge. Medical privacy laws meant that specific details about the King's diagnosis and treatment would remain confidential, but the palace committed to providing regular updates on his condition and any adjustments to his schedule. This balance between transparency and privacy had been carefully considered, recognizing both the public's legitimate interest and the King's right to medical confidentiality. The financial markets showed initial volatility following the announcement, though experienced analysts noted that the British constitutional system was specifically designed to handle such situations without disruption to governance or economic stability. The pound sterling fluctuated briefly, but recovered as investors recognized that the announcement, while significant, did not fundamentally alter Britain's political or economic foundations. Royal protection officers had quietly increased security measures around all senior royals in anticipation of heightened public interest and media attention following the announcement. The goal was to maintain normal activities while ensuring the safety of the royal family during what would inevitably be a period of intense scrutiny. Queen Camilla's role became even more crucial in the hours following the broadcast. She had already been taking on increasing responsibilities as queen consort, but now she would need to represent the crown at various events while also providing personal support to her husband during his treatment. Her experience and steady presence would prove invaluable in maintaining royal continuity. The British public's response revealed the complex relationship between the monarchy and the people it served. While some questioned the relevance of the royal institution in modern times, the personal nature of the King's announcement seemed to remind many of the human element behind the ceremonial roles. Cancer, as a disease that had touched virtually every family in Britain, created an unexpected point of connection between the sovereign and his subjects. International media coverage varied significantly, reflecting different cultural attitudes toward monarchy and privacy. American networks focused heavily on the personal drama and potential implications for the Commonwealth relationship. European broadcasters emphasized the constitutional continuity aspects, while Commonwealth nations highlighted their continued support for the crown regardless of the King's health challenges. Medical charities and cancer research organizations quickly recognized the potential positive impact of the King's openness about his diagnosis. Calls to cancer helplines increased dramatically in the hours following his announcement, as people who had been avoiding medical consultations were prompted to seek advice. The royal health effect had been documented before, and medical professionals anticipated a significant increase in cancer screening appointments in the coming weeks. The timing of the announcement, coming relatively early in Charles's reign, added particular poignancy to the situation. He had waited decades to become king, ascending to the throne at an age when most people are well into retirement. The irony of facing a major health challenge so soon after achieving his life's ambition was not lost on commentators or the public. Palace staff worked through the night following the announcement, coordinating responses to thousands of messages of support from world leaders, organizations, and private citizens. The outpouring of goodwill demonstrated the global reach and continued relevance of the British monarchy, even in an age of Republican movements and institutional skepticism. The king's decision to personally deliver the announcement, rather than having it released through official statements or spokespeople, was widely praised by constitutional experts and communication professionals. In an era when public figures often seemed distant and protected by layers of staff and publicity machinery, Charles's direct approach was seen as refreshingly honest and appropriately respectful of his relationship with the public. As the evening wore on, the full implications of the announcement began to settle in. This was more than just news about one man's health. It was a moment that would define Charles's reign and potentially influence the monarchy's future relationship with the British people and the Commonwealth. The king's courage in sharing such personal news publicly had set a new standard for royal transparency and authenticity. The broadcast would be remembered not just for its content, but for the dignity and grace with which it was delivered. Charles had faced one of the most difficult moments of his life with the same sense of duty and service that had characterized his entire public career. In doing so, he had transformed a personal crisis into an opportunity to demonstrate the enduring values that the monarchy represented at its best. Hashtag King Charles breaks his silence. Part 3. The days following King Charles's announcement transformed Buckingham Palace into a carefully orchestrated hub of activity, where royal duties continued alongside the personal challenge of beginning cancer treatment. The king had insisted that life at the palace should proceed as normally as possible, though everyone understood that nothing would quite be the same as before. Dr. Sarah Mitchell arrived at the palace each morning at precisely 8 o'clock, carrying a medical bag that contained the daily medications and monitoring equipment necessary for the king's care. She had worked with royal patients before, but never under such public scrutiny or with such complex scheduling demands. The balance between medical needs and royal responsibilities required constant coordination between her team and palace staff. The first treatment session took place at the London Clinic, a private medical facility that had been chosen for its combination of world-class care and discretion. Charles traveled there in an unmarked vehicle, accompanied by his personal protection officers and medical team. The sight of the king walking into the clinic, appearing composed and determined despite the circumstances, was captured by a single photographer and became one of the defining images of his cancer journey. Professor David Thompson, the lead oncologist, had developed a treatment protocol specifically tailored to Charles's particular diagnosis and his unique lifestyle demands. The approach was aggressive enough to provide the best possible outcome, but scheduled in a way that would allow the king to maintain some of his most important constitutional duties. Weekly treatment sessions were planned for Wednesdays, giving Charles time to recover before weekend engagements. Queen Camilla had quietly reorganized her entire schedule to be present for every treatment session, often bringing books to read aloud during the lengthy infusion processes. These moments of private companionship, away from the demands of royal protocol, provided both of them with precious time together. Staff noted that their relationship seemed to deepen during this period, as they faced together the vulnerability that serious illness brings. The constitutional implications of the king's treatment required careful navigation by palace officials and government advisors. While Charles remained fully capable of performing his duties as head of state, provisions were made for Prince William to handle certain ceremonial functions when medical appointments conflicted with scheduled engagements. This arrangement worked seamlessly, demonstrating the strength of the institutional framework surrounding the monarchy. Public reaction continued to evolve in the weeks following the announcement. Initial shock had given way to a sustained outpouring of support that surprised even experienced palace staff. Thousands of letters arrived daily from across Britain and the Commonwealth, many sharing personal stories of cancer journeys and offering encouragement. A dedicated team was established to respond to this correspondence, with Charles insisting that every letter receive a personal acknowledgement. The King Charles effect on cancer awareness became evident within weeks of his announcement. Medical centers across the UK reported dramatic increases in requests for cancer screenings, particularly from men over 60 who had been avoiding routine checkups. Dr. Amanda Foster, Director of Cancer Research UK, called it the most significant single boost to cancer awareness in a generation, crediting the King's openness with saving lives through early detection. International visits and state functions required particularly careful planning during this period. A scheduled state visit from the President of France was modified to reduce the physical demands on Charles while maintaining the diplomatic importance of the event. The French president, himself a cancer survivor, privately expressed his admiration for Charles's handling of the situation and offered personal insights from his own experience. The King's weekly audiences with the Prime Minister took on a different dynamic during this period. While these meetings had always been confidential, they now included discreet discussions about contingency planning and the potential need for temporary adjustments to constitutional procedures. The Prime Minister was struck by Charles's continued sharp focus on governance issues, despite the physical challenges of his treatment. Media coverage of the King's cancer journey walked a careful line between public interest and respect for medical privacy. Experienced royal correspondents worked closely with palace press officers to ensure accurate reporting while avoiding the speculation and sensationalism that had characterized some previous royal health stories. The approach was largely successful, with most outlets maintaining a respectful tone throughout the treatment period. Prince William's expanded role during this time provided valuable preparation for his future as king, though he was careful never to overshadow his father or create any impression that he was assuming duties prematurely. His handling of additional engagements was widely praised, showing a maturity and natural authority that reassured those concerned about the monarchy's long-term future. Princess Anne's typically no-nonsense approach to the family crisis proved invaluable. She took on several of Charles's patronage responsibilities without fanfare, maintaining the same high standards of engagement that had characterized her royal career. Her practical support allowed Charles to focus on his most essential duties while ensuring that important causes continued to receive royal attention. The King's environmental and architectural interests, which had been central to his public identity for decades, took on new urgency during his treatment. Knowing that his active advocacy time might be limited, he accelerated several key initiatives, working with longer hours when his energy permitted. His staff noted an increased intensity in his approach to these causes, as if he was determined to advance his vision for sustainable development regardless of personal health challenges. Treatment side effects, while managed carefully by his medical team, inevitably affected Charles's energy levels and appearance. The public noticed these changes during his carefully scheduled appearances, but responded with sympathy rather than concern about his fitness for office. His obvious determination to continue serving, even when clearly not feeling his best, seemed to enhance rather than diminish public respect for his commitment. Religious faith played an important role in Charles's approach to his cancer journey. As Supreme Governor of the Church of England, he had always taken seriously the spiritual dimensions of his role, but facing serious illness deepened his reflections on mortality and service. His private meetings with the Archbishop of Canterbury became more frequent, focusing not just on church business, but on the personal spiritual challenges of leadership during adversity. The King's medical team was particularly impressed by his disciplined approach to treatment. Despite the discomfort and fatigue that accompanied his therapy, Charles maintained a positive attitude and followed medical instructions precisely. His years of military training and royal discipline served him well during the most difficult phases of treatment, when maintaining normal activities required enormous willpower. Security arrangements evolved subtly during this period, with protection officers receiving specialized training in medical emergency procedures. While the King's condition was stable and his treatment progressing well, the potential for unexpected complications required enhanced preparedness. These measures were implemented discreetly, ensuring that Charles's public appearances maintained their normal atmosphere. The Commonwealth's response to the king's health challenge demonstrated the enduring emotional connections between the crown and the member nations. Leaders from across the Commonwealth made special efforts to visit London during this period, often bringing personal gifts and messages of support from their people. These visits provided Charles with tremendous emotional sustenance and reinforced his sense of purpose in his constitutional role. Financial support for cancer research increased dramatically during this period, with donations to medical charities reaching record levels. The King Charles Cancer Research Fund was established by private donors, despite Charles's initial reluctance to have his name associated with fundraising efforts related to his personal illness. The fund eventually raised millions for cancer research, becoming one of the unexpected positive outcomes of his public health journey. Staff morale at the palace remained remarkably high throughout this challenging period, inspired by the king's example of grace under pressure and the supportive atmosphere created by Queen Camilla. The crisis brought out the best in the royal household, with everyone from senior officials to kitchen staff contributing to maintaining the smooth operation of the monarchy during an uncertain time. The king's public appearances during treatment were carefully orchestrated to maintain dignity, while acknowledging the reality of his situation. He refused to wear the obvious symbols of illness, but also avoided attempting to project false energy when he was clearly tired. This authentic approach resonated with the public, who appreciated his honesty about the challenges he was facing. As treatment progressed through the initial weeks, medical reports indicated encouraging signs of response to therapy. While Dr. Thompson and his team remained cautiously optimistic, the early indicators suggested that the king's cancer was responding well to the chosen treatment protocol. This news, shared carefully with the palace and eventually the public, provided hope during what had been a difficult period for the royal family and the nation. Hashtag King Charles breaks his silence. Part 4. 6 months after his initial diagnosis announcement, King Charles III sat in the same study where he had prepared his first address to the nation about his cancer. This time, however, the atmosphere was markedly different. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating a room that now felt filled with hope rather than the heavy uncertainty that had characterized those earlier days. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had just delivered the news that the entire medical team had been hoping for. The latest scans showed significant improvement in the king's condition, with clear evidence that the cancer was responding excellently to treatment. The tumors had shrunk substantially, and blood markers indicated that his body was winning the battle against the disease. While Dr. Mitchell emphasized that continued monitoring and treatment would be necessary, the prognosis had shifted from cautious optimism to genuine confidence about long-term recovery. The decision to share this positive news with the public had been easier than the original announcement, but it carried its own complexities. Charles wanted to express gratitude for the overwhelming support he had received, while also using the moment to highlight the broader importance of cancer research and early detection. His personal journey had taught him valuable lessons that he believed could benefit others facing similar challenges. Professor David Thompson's final assessment before the public announcement was unequivocally positive. The king's response to treatment had exceeded even the most optimistic projections from the medical team. Charles's disciplined approach to treatment, combined with excellent medical care and strong family support, had created optimal conditions for recovery. The professor noted that Charles's case would likely become a valuable study in the medical literature, demonstrating how public figures could successfully balance serious medical treatment with professional responsibilities. Queen Camilla had been the first person Charles called with the good news, despite the fact that she was sitting right beside him in the consulting room when Dr. Mitchell delivered the results. Their shared relief and joy in that moment represented the emotional culmination of months of uncertainty and determined optimism. Staff later remarked that they had never seen the couple appear more united or more genuinely happy than in the days following the positive medical report. The king's second televised address to the nation was scheduled for a Sunday evening, chosen to reach the largest possible audience and to provide a peaceful end to the weekend for families who had been following his journey. The tone would be completely different from his initial announcement, grateful, hopeful, and forward-looking rather than the careful solemnity that had characterized his first speech about the diagnosis. Prince William's reaction to his father's improved prognosis was visible to everyone around him. The weight of potential future responsibility that had settled on his shoulders during the uncertain months seemed to lift, allowing him to return to his normal pace of royal duties rather than the intensified schedule he had maintained during the treatment period. His relief was shared by Catherine and their children, who had all been affected by the family health crisis. The broader impact of the King's cancer journey on public health awareness had been extraordinary. Cancer Research UK reported that screening appointments had increased by 40% since Charles's initial announcement, with particularly dramatic increases among men over 60 who had previously avoided regular checkups. Dr. Amanda Foster estimated that hundreds of cancers had been caught early as a direct result of the King Charles effect, potentially saving numerous lives. International reaction to the King's positive health news was swift and celebratory. World leaders who had sent messages of support during his treatment now expressed their joy at his recovery. President Biden called personally to congratulate Charles and to share his own family's experience with cancer recovery. European leaders emphasized how Charles's handling of his illness had enhanced rather than diminished his international standing and credibility. The Commonwealth response was particularly moving, with spontaneous celebrations occurring in several member nations. In Canada, church bells rang in major cities. Australia's Parliament opened with a special acknowledgement of the King's recovery. Small island nations throughout the Caribbean sent traditional blessing ceremonies. These responses demonstrated the deep personal connection many Commonwealth citizens felt to their shared monarch. The medical team's decision to gradually reduce treatment intensity while maintaining careful monitoring represented a new phase in Charles's health journey. Rather than the intensive weekly sessions that had characterized the initial treatment period, he would now transition to monthly checkups with less aggressive therapy. This schedule would allow him to return to a more normal level of royal duties while maintaining the medical vigilance necessary for long-term health. Palace staff began planning for a return to Charles's full schedule of engagements, though with some modifications based on lessons learned during the treatment period. The King had discovered that certain types of events were particularly draining, while others seemed to energize him. Future planning would take these insights into account, creating a more sustainable approach to royal duties that could serve him well into his later years. The King's environmental and architectural initiatives, which had continued throughout his treatment, now took on renewed urgency and focus. His experience with illness had reinforced his belief in the interconnectedness of human health and environmental wellness. Several major sustainability projects that had been developing slowly for years suddenly accelerated, as if Charles was determined to use his recovery as a platform for advancing causes he cared deeply about. Public perception of the monarchy had evolved significantly during Charles's health crisis. Opinion polls showed increased support for the institution, with many people expressing admiration for how the King had handled his illness with dignity and openness. Younger demographics, who had previously shown less interest in royal affairs, reported feeling more connected to the crown as a result of Charles's authentic approach to sharing his health journey. The financial impact of Charles's cancer announcement on healthcare stocks and medical research funding had been substantial and positive. Investment in cancer treatment technologies increased markedly, and pharmaceutical companies reported renewed interest in oncology research. The King's recovery story became a powerful symbol of medical progress and the importance of continued research investment. Security arrangements around the royal family began returning to normal levels, though the enhanced medical emergency protocols established during treatment remained in place. The King's security team had developed new expertise in protecting a principal with ongoing health considerations, skills that would serve them well as Charles aged. The King Charles Cancer Research Fund, established by private donors during his illness, had grown into a major force in British medical research. Despite Charles's initial reluctance to have his name associated with fundraising related to his personal health struggle, he eventually embraced the fund as an opportunity to transform his difficult experience in a lasting benefit for others facing similar challenges. Religious communities across Britain and the Commonwealth had organized countless prayer services and spiritual support activities during the king's treatment. The positive outcome was seen by many as validation of their faith and prayers, strengthening the spiritual dimension of the crown's relationship with religious communities worldwide. Charles's own faith had deepened during his illness, adding new dimensions to his role as supreme governor of the Church of England. The media's handling of the king's health story had set new standards for royal coverage, balancing legitimate public interest with appropriate respect for medical privacy. The approach had been largely successful, maintaining public engagement without sensationalism. This precedent would likely influence how future royal health issues were covered, creating a more mature and responsible framework for such reporting. As Charles prepared for his second major address about his health, he reflected on how the experience had changed him both personally and as a monarch. The vulnerability of serious illness had brought unexpected insights about leadership, service, and the importance of authentic connection with the people he served. His recovery was not just a personal victory, but a demonstration of resilience that he hoped would inspire others facing their own health challenges. The final version of his recovery announcement struck themes of gratitude, hope, and renewed commitment to service. Charles wanted to thank not just his medical team and family, but the countless people across the UK and Commonwealth who had sent messages of support, shared their own cancer stories, or simply kept him in their thoughts and prayers during the difficult months. On the evening of his second address, Charles appeared visibly healthier and more energetic than he had in months. The pallor and fatigue that had marked his appearance during treatment had given way to his natural complexion and the alert bearing that had always characterized his public appearances. Most importantly, his eyes carried a spark of renewed purpose and optimism that had been missing during the uncertain months of treatment. The king's cancer journey had become more than a personal health story. It had evolved into a powerful narrative about courage, transparency, and the enduring strength of institutions built on service to others. His recovery represented not just medical success, but a triumph for the human spirit and the supportive power of community. As he prepared to speak to the nation once again, Charles embodied the hope and resilience that had carried him through his greatest personal challenge and emerged as a stronger, more authentic leader.